Hello, I'm Emily Rutherford-Liska. Welcome to the Jacksonville History Show. On our segment, we'll have two exciting features. First, we'll talk to Ed Booth Jr., a local attorney and a historian of note, certainly a local historian of great expertise. And he'll talk to us about the history of what else? It's timely, Duval County courthouses. And later on, I'll be joined by former Jacksonville Historical Society President Harry Reagan, and we'll talk about a very exciting anniversary, the 190th anniversary of the founding of Jacksonville, Florida. But first, I want to welcome Ed. Hello,
Ed Booth.
Emily. How are you?
It's good to see you.
And you are such a great local historian. You're very scholarly with this. You pick very interesting topics, very timely topics, I should say. And one of those is a topic, one of those topics near and dear to your heart would be that of the history of our county courthouses. It's actually a fun topic.
It is, and we are eagerly awaiting the opening of what will be Duval County's 5th courthouse.
And perhaps by the time this show airs, it will actually have occupants, but that's tough to know because that has changed rather on a daily, weekly basis.
It has, but I thought it would be interesting today to look back on the first 4 Duval County courthouses.
Okay, and let's take a look.
And we will start that journey.
Okay.
We first have to go back 450 years to Fort Caroline to find the first documented court proceeding in Duval County. A trial was held 450 years ago in Fort Caroline. But when we talk about courthouse structures, we have to start with the founding of the city of Jacksonville in 1822. This was the 185th anniversary of the founding. This is a commemoration, recreation of Isaiah Hart laying out the streets of the city of Jacksonville. Duval County was founded the same year, and a court system was established. The court system didn't have much to do until a lawyer moved to town. A man named Andrew Bellamy opened the first law office in Jacksonville in 1823. And in December of that year, the first court sessions were held. Not having a courthouse, these were held out in the open under the trees on the northeast corner of Market and Forsyth Street. This is what the site looks like today.
So they could actually be doing that today, like our forefathers, perhaps?
They have many options. Fort Caroline is still available.
That's true, too.
And well secured. This is a photo of the site today. Judge Smith, who was a Yale Law School graduate, more famous for being the father of Confederate War General Kirby Smith, was the presiding judge, and he held a court session on December the 1st of 1823. Almost immediately, a construction of a courthouse began on this same site, the northeast corner of Forsyth and Market Street.
And they paid a judge, by the way, John Doggett. Well, supposedly, they never really paid him for years and years as the contractor for that courthouse.
And it took many years to construct it. It was a wooden structure, a 2-story barn. But by 1826, court sessions were being held there. And the building was finally completed by 1840. This is what the site looks like today. It's a parking lot. But the first courthouse was in place for the event of Florida becoming an official state in 1854. But
45. You inverted it, yeah.
1845.
Right
16 years later, Florida seceded from the Union by the signing of this document, declaring Florida to be a separate and distinct nation apart from the United States.
And earlier I learned something about that document. You told me your wife's, tell it again.
My wife's great-great-grandfather was one of the signers.
That's just
of,
amazing.
of this document.
You pointed
but
to it, yes.
Abraham Lincoln was not pleased. He dispatched federal troops. And within 2 years, they had arrived in Jacksonville, and one of the things they took care of almost immediately was burning down the first courthouse. That is how the first Duval County courthouse met its end.
And it took us nearly 20 years to build that one, and so then it was gone.
It did, and I guess the point is that our forebears had problems with their courthouses too. And this first one being burned to the ground by an invading army. Reconstruction was a difficult process. It took many, many years, but a court system was reestablished in the new United States. And by 1886, a new Duval County courthouse had been constructed. This was a handsome structure that looks very similar to the historic courthouse in Nassau County in downtown Fernandina Beach on Center Street. The building is very, very similar. And it served us for about 15 years. We have a number of excellent photographs of this building. Unfortunately, it met its end in a fire, the Great Jacksonville Fire of May of 1901. Burned the courthouse to the ground, but that was an interesting afternoon that I know has been covered in detail on this show over the years.
Yeah, we lost all government buildings but one, and that included the schoolhouses too.
But there were many heroes that day. One was a Mr. Spratt, who was a title clerk who saved the property records by placing them in a rowboat going out into the center of the St. Johns River, and therefore enabling later generations to be able to trace property titles back before 1901. Other heroes were the judge and Judge Phillips and Clerk John Alsop, who ran around the courthouse gathering up the court records, placed them in the vault, shut the vault, and then fled the advancing flames. Those records were retrieved several days later once the vault had cooled off, and the court records were saved, and it allowed court to get back up and running within 4 days. Clerk John Alsop later became Mayor John Alsop, and the Main Street Bridge, of course, is named after him.
The longest serving mayor in our history, and too infrequently do people actually call that the Alsop Bridge. Usually the Main Street Bridge or the Blue Bridge, which
we have the Hart, the Acosta,
yes,
the Fuller Warren, but no one calls John Alsop's Bridge by its proper name.
Broward gets the same rap, Napoleon Bonaparte Broward, everybody calls it the Dames Point Bridge. But back to the story, which is such a good one.
Jacksonville is in ruins. Our city fathers don't sit around waiting for federal aid to arrive. They get up the next morning and go about the task of rebuilding Jacksonville. And one of the remarkable stories is the fact that the court system was up and running in less than 4 days.
After the Great Fire?
After the Great Fire. The Great Fire was on a Friday. The court system would have been closed Saturday and Sunday anyway. So they basically missed 1 day of court that Monday, May the 6th, and by May the 7th they were back in operation. This is a recreation of a news article showing the court met actually in the upstairs portion of a saloon.
Good
later,
for them.
later moved to more permanent quarters, and the government functions were restored within a matter of mere days. And what is even more remarkable is that in less than a year, this building that you see on the screen, the 1902 courthouse, Jacksonville's third courthouse, was constructed and opened to the public.
In 1 year.
In 1 year.
That is astounding. I'd forgotten it was that rapid, the opening date.
And this building served us for almost 55 years. You'll find that the fourth courthouse that we'll talk about in a minute also served us for 55 years. So that seems to be the life expectancy of a recent courthouse in Duval County. This structure stood across the street from courthouses 1 and 2 on the northwest corner of Forsyth and Market Street. These are some photographs of it at various stages during its life. This is an interesting photograph that shows the 1902 courthouse on the left and what was reconstructed from the 1886 courthouse, which became an armory. The walls survived the fire, and it was turned into this armory. And the walls survived in one form or another until they were torn down about 9 years ago.
Not that long ago.
Not until 2003.
But a rather hideous-looking structure by the time they took it down. It had been so maligned in its renovations. Yes.
It was covered with stucco. It didn't look anything like
nothing
this.
like that beautiful building.
This is what the site of the 1902 courthouse looks like today. It's part of the City Hall Annex Yates building. This photograph will explain what survives of the 1902 courthouse. If you look to the far left of the photograph, you will see an annex that was added to the 1902 courthouse sometime in the 1930s. Little different architectural style, But it survives to this day as the Yates Building, facing Forsyth Street.
That center component there, yes, where you pay parking fines. I know that building well.
It's where you get your license plates and pay your
I know it for that reason,
and pay your parking tickets.
That's right.
By 1956, it was realized that the 1902 courthouse had outlived its usefulness, and plans were made to not only build a new courthouse, but to revitalize the waterfront. At the site of the historic Calford Crossing, the courthouse that would open in 1958 was constructed. Unfortunately, during 1957, during the construction of the building, the worst industrial accident in Duval County history occurred. 7 workers were killed, 15 severely injured during the construction of that building. A monument to their labor stands on the west side of the 1958 Duval County Courthouse. Courthouse was built for, get this, $7 million. And that included a 450-bed jail located on the other side of Liberty Street. It was
Unbelievable fact, that is.
Curious location for a jail. Yeah. Kind of a cruel joke to the inmates that their street address was Liberty Street. And as you know, the north end of Liberty Street is Evergreen Cemetery.
And so sort of a cruel to the taxpayers that many of the prisoners had a river view. So
that is correct. But we talk a lot about architecture and historic buildings on this show. I don't think any historians would call anything historic about the design of the 1958 courthouse. No. Big brick box is probably the best description of this architecture. But it served us for 55 years and had a couple of interesting features. It stood on the river. It was decided to revitalize a rather dilapidated waterfront of its era.
The old City Hall there, now called the City Hall Annex, the tall one next to that. Yes.
And these are some period photographs that show the City Hall on the left and the Duval County Courthouse on the right. A lot of people don't realize that the parking lots behind the buildings are actually piers built out over the bridge. As the 1840 courthouse, our first courthouse, was used as a garrison during the Seminole Indian Wars, the 1958 courthouse was designed to do double duty as a fallout shelter in the event of nuclear attack and was equipped with blast doors and stocked with survival supplies. So history does have a way of repeating itself. The design specifications for the 1958 courthouse called for separate bathrooms for separate races, something that seemed eminently reasonable to the people of that era, which we have gone way, way past that, but there's a reminder in a history lesson that we probably should not forget, because in the fourth building that you could go into up until a couple of weeks ago, there were 2 men's rooms right next to each other.
Never noticed that.
And that depicts this. A rather controversial sculpture graced the elevator lobby of the courthouse, showing a bare-breasted Lady Liberty. As a young prosecutor, I thought it somewhat ironic. We were prosecuting women occasionally for topless dancing upstairs while you had this artwork displayed downstairs. It, by the way, has been taken down and is being moved to the new building. Another interesting, my favorite part of the 1958 courthouse is the fact that the mental health department and the marriage license department were located right across the aisle from each other. But by the year 2000, it was recognized that the fourth courthouse had outlived its usefulness. Plans were made by way of the Better Jacksonville plan to construct a new courthouse. First, this design was proposed with a dome on it and a rotunda larger than the U.S. Capitol building. A groundbreaking was held in April of 2003. We were to be occupying the building by 2005.
And Mayor Delaney was in office at that time.
That's correct.
When the groundbreaking
This was his plan. This was the design of the building. We broke ground for it in April of 2003. Construction started, mayoral administrations changed, and the project was brought to a halt. Monroe Street was even reopened through the construction site. Nonetheless, we started over with a new design after looking at vacant lots for many years. This is on the screen is the design proposed by Turner Construction and the one that was ultimately built. Construction began in 2009, and the new courthouse steadily rose up out of the ground. Here are some photographs
Your
of it.
images are amazing, and many from the air. I see the overhead view.
But by 2011, it took shape, was being finished out on the inside, and will open sometime during June of 2012.
And about this image, you made an important point about the parking garage. Would you mention that?
The parking garage on the right blocks the view of the building, which is an attractive building. This is because the parking garage was designed for a different building and constructed in advance. The original courthouse design faced to the west. The parking garage would not have obstructed the view of its facade. The current building faces to the south and its view is blocked. Although with the proper camera angle, one can capture the full view of the courthouse, which is this view right here.
Which you did. You mastered, because these are all your images.
These are my photographs. But the courthouses have served Jacksonville well. And the point I want to close with is that our forefathers faced many, many challenges with courthouses. What we are facing now is not out of the ordinary. I'm sure we will work through this, and this new courthouse, Duval County's 5th, will serve us well in the coming years.
Ed, I want to thank you so much. You were a wealth of knowledge, and I really think the insights you brought to this are unique, and I'm glad everybody got to hear them. Thank you once again and for talking to us about the history of Duval County courthouses.
It's been my pleasure, Emily.
Thank you. And if you stay tuned, we'll be right back with Harry Reagan, and we're going to talk about the founding of Jacksonville, Florida, and what led to all these courthouses. Stay with us. We'll be right back.